What is up, guys? Evil Duosarm here today with part 3 of the 2D side-scroller tutorial that we're working on here. In this part, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make the rest of our animation flipbooks. So we're going to go through that file and put together all the flipbooks. Then we're going to go ahead and apply the combat ones. So right now, after this video, your character will be able to run around, throw kunai, and swing their sword a little bit. So it'll be a pretty encompassing video, and it's actually going to be pretty long because we need to go ahead and edit a whole bunch of things. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first things first, you need to actually create these animation files. So if you skipped the last video, I'll show you how to do it one more time, but then I'll leave it to you to go ahead and create the rest. So, and I'm going to go really quickly through this. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop into that character folder we created before, hop into our animations folder, our sprites folder, and we need to create 4 new folders. So these folders are going to be attack, and then we're going to need a jump attack, and then we're going to need a kunai, and a jump kunai. I'm going to start with a regular attack so you can follow along for this part, and then you'll have to go ahead and make the rest on your own. So once again, we're going to open up that PNG folder that we added to that in our project file. We added it into the source file that we created in video 1. Character, PNG, they're all right here. So we're going to go ahead and pull all of the attack sprites. So once again, click on them, shift-click, and then drag them into the content browser down here in the attack. Wait for the little plus to drop in, and go ahead and put all those in. Right-click on it. Sprite actions, create sprite, it's going to create sprites from all this. Once again, right click, create flipbook, it's going to create the attack flipbook for all of these. Hit enter, Control Shift S to save everything, and we now have our attack animation. So we're going to go ahead and do this for all of the other animations, create the little flipbook. I will see you after we're done with that. Alright, so after you've done that, you should have a total of 7 different animations in this flipbooks folder. So once again, all I did was drag the flipbooks over into the flipbooks folder that we created before. So we should have our attack, our jump throw, and our throw animations all added into this folder right now. So from here, what we're going to have to do is go ahead and code in when the character is going to do each of those. So each of these animations is going to have their own little set of conditions that causes them to play. So we're going to have to go ahead and do that. First things first, however, we need to actually go ahead and bind these into a control on the character. So what we're going to do is head over to the settings menu at the top of the screen, click settings, and then we're going to go to project settings. From the project settings menu, if you scroll down a little bit, you're going to see an option that says input over here on the left. It is below the engine tab. So if we go ahead and click input, we're going to see these bindings here. So we have action mappings and we have axis mappings. Axis mappings are for movement. Action mappings are for doing different things in the game. So right now the only action mapping is jump. We need to add 2 action mappings. So the first action mapping is going to be sword or whatever you want to call it. And the other action mapping is going to be throw. So we have our sword attack and our throw attack, 2 different attacks. Each of these are going to have to be sent off by a different button. So for the sword attack, just for ease, I'm going to go ahead and use the J key. So if you just type in J into the little search box, it's going to add the J key to the keyboard, and it'll make J is now going to use the sword attack. For the throw attack, same thing. I'm going to go ahead and use K, since both of those are right on the other side. Now, since there's a whole bunch of different options with K in it, you're going to have to scroll down until you find just the K key. So keyboard, K. If you were doing this for a console game, you could make it any one of the face buttons on the controllers. If you're doing it for like a computer game, you could make it left mouse, right mouse, if like it's shoot and reload, or whatever you're trying to do. This is where you make those bindings, right here in this menu. So anyway, all you gotta do is hit close on this after you do it, save current, and it will save that. Like, so if I go back to settings, project settings, head over to the input tab, you will see that both of those have been saved in there. They're now in the game, actually hard-coded into the game. So that's all set. We've got our coding in for our what controllers are gonna do. So now we're going to go back to our character blueprint and set up what triggers the animations. So to get back to the character blueprint, head back to the character folder that we created originally, go to the 2D side-scroller character and open it up, and then navigate your way to the handle animation tab over here. Now we're going to need to make a little bit of room because we have a lot of stuff that's going to be happening right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on all of these. So to select all these, just left click and drag and move these off to the side. Next thing I'm going to do is take this whole handle animation thing, so I'll just left click drag, and then bring it up to make myself some room. So now I have a lot more room, and I can actually just drag this bottom bit so it all stays inside of the gray box and makes it neat and organized. Alright, so we have 2 different animations we want to pull in. We have the sword attack and we have the kunai throwing attack. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get both of those inputs that we created in the previous step here in these project settings. We're going to want to pull both of those in. So to get those, all you got to do is type them in. So right click to open up this little search box, and we want the throw animation. So what you're looking for is input, action events, throw. And then the other one we're looking for is the attack. So I believe we labeled that sword, so we're going to type in sword. And there it is, input, action events, sword. Whatever you named it in the previous step is where this is going to be, or what it's going to be called. So we have both of those, but that's not all we're going to need. We're going to need to create 2 custom events to get this to work properly, or the way that I have it. There's infinitely different ways to do that, which is part of the fun of Unreal Engine. You can figure out so many different ways, but this method is pretty darn easy, so we're going to go ahead and show you how to do it this way. So we're actually going to do this for the sword first, so I want to switch the order of these. So we're going to move sword on top and throw below. What we're going to want to do though is create a custom event. So what you're going to do is go ahead and scroll down to this tick section down here. So in this tick section, you see this update animation event that's called. This update animation event that you see right here is actually what is updating our character's movement over here. So you see it says update animation here, and then it goes ahead and updates where the character's moving or jumping or whatever it's doing. So the event tick basically means every millisecond or whatever the time difference is here. It's usually based off of your frame rate. So off of that is when it updates an animation. Whenever that tick goes, it updates the animation. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do these attacking update animations. We're going to have two separate ones. We're going to have one for the sword attack and we're going to have one for the throw. So to go ahead and create those two custom events, we're going to go back up to over here above our two things, and we'll drag a little bit more room to make it easier. So we're going to add two different custom events. So what you're going to do is right click and type in custom event. So above the sword attack, we're going to call this ATK sword. That is going to be our custom event for our sword attack animations. Above the throw, same thing, right click, type in custom event, and type in ATK throw. So we have our two custom events. The next thing we're going to need is we're going to need two variables. So they're going to be Boolean variables. So to create these variables, what you're going to do is go to the left over here where you see variables, and you're going to add two variables. So just type it twice. What you're going to want to do is rename these. So right click, rename, and we're going to call one throwing, and we're going to call the other one sorting, because, you know, why not? Sword is in like a sword. Sorting. Okay, you can name variables whatever you want. It has no impact. As long as you remember what it is, that's what it is. Compile and save. So now if we go back down to the event tick time down here, we're going to have two options. We need to have two branches for these two variables. So you're going to do is going to add two branches. So branch, and then add another branch. So we have our two branches, and we're going to go ahead and make a little bit more room down here for this as well. So we're going to add both the branches in like this. And one of them is going to function off of the throwing animation, and one of them is going to function off of the sorting animation, or the sorting variable. So just go ahead and drag and click those, and you can actually just click and drag the variable right over and onto the actual branch itself, which is pretty cool. So what we're going to want to do is take this update animation tag here, and we're going to want to go ahead and drag this event tick up to the first branch. So now that we're running our event tick through the first branch, we're going to find out if we're attacking with the sword. Well, how do we know if we're attacking with the sword? It's from the input action of the sword. So once again, if we go to input action sword, we're going to drag off of the press thing. So whenever we press down the input action sword, which is the J key as we configured earlier, we're going to type in the variable sorting, and we're going to set sorting to true. So basically what we're saying is whenever we press this button, this variable is true. We're sorting. We are sorting whenever we hit the sword button. Okay, so sorting has been set. We're going to go back down here. Okay, so what happens when sorting is true? When sorting is true, we want to go ahead and run the sword attack animation. So once again, the sword attack animations were back up here. The attack sword is what we're going to be running this off of. So what we're going to want to do is call the attack sword animation. So if sorting is true, we're going to call attack sword. Simple. And then from attack sword, what we want to do is go ahead and update the position and facing of the character. So we just drag back down to the same compare float section. So that completes our little attack sword thing. If we are not sorting, what we want to do is we want to check and see if we're throwing. So just drag the false down to the input of the throwing branch, and same exact thing. If the throwing branch is true, what we want to do is attack sword, or attack throw rather. So check to see if we're doing the throwing button. If we are, we're going to go ahead and type in attack throw, and then return that back to our compare float variable. If that is not the case, then we're going to go back to just animating whether we're walking left or right. Really simple. Once again, just to cover it, what's happening is every tick, every second, every millisecond, whatever the time frame is there, we're going to check to see if our player has pressed down the sword attack button. If they have pressed down the sword attack button, we're going to play the sword attack animations. If that's not the case, we're going to check to see if they are throwing something. If they are throwing something, we'll play the throw attack animation. If they are not, we will go ahead and branch off and continue with just moving around. We'll check our movement animations. So we're going to go ahead and compile and save that, and we actually need to make sure that we add in the throwing variable over here. So once again, just click and drag off and type in throwing. We're going to set throwing to true whenever we throw. Okay, so now we need to have something that limits or tells when we're done doing these variables. So the animations themselves take about half a second to play. So we want to switch from the actual animation of attacking back to the movement animation after about half a second. So in order to do that, we're going to drag off and we're going to type in delay. For our delay, we're going to type in 0.5 seconds. So once again, it's a 0.5 second delay, half a second delay. Same thing for this. Delay, we're going to delay by 0.5 seconds. So that's going to let the animation play entirely. And I know we haven't done the animation yet, but when we get to it, it'll all make sense. So our delay is for half a second. After that half a second, we want to go ahead and set the variables again. So for this first one, we're going to set sorting, and we're going to uncheck the box. Basically, after half a second, we are no longer using the sort attack, so the player can return to the animations of walking or moving or jumping or whatever they are running. Same thing with this one. We're going to go ahead and set the throwing variable, set throwing, to false after the completion of that animation as well. So what's going to happen now? The player presses the sword attack button. It's going to play the sword attack animation. After half a second, it's going to switch this variable to false no matter what. So the player's not going to continue to attack after this. They're going to do one attack, and then it's going to complete and switch back to movement, because it's going to go false, false, and switch back to movement. Now, this isn't counting for the fact if the player presses both buttons at the same time. What will happen, so we'll have to come up with a clause for that in a second, but for the time being, this will get us prototyping. So, okay, we've got it. Our character's going to switch between the different variables. If it's sorting, he's going to do the sort attacks. If it's throwing, he's going to do the throw attacks. Now we need to make sure that the actual animation plays through that we want. So for this, we have two options. So we're going to go with the attack sword first, and we have two options. We have the jumping attack and the standing attack. So what we need to do first is find out if the character is jumping. So exact same thing we already did before up here with this step for whether the character was jumping for the jump animation. We're going to go ahead and add in a branch. We're going to go ahead and connect the attack sword event in, and we can actually just drag this is falling bit from here down to the branch down here. And then at this point, what we want to do is set the flipbook, same exact thing we've been doing. So if they are falling, we want to go ahead and set flipbook for our sprite, and we want to set it to the jump attack because they're in the air, so we want to do the jump attack. Likewise, if they are on the ground, we want to go ahead and do the standing attack. So we're going to go ahead and hit set flipbook. So I'll actually show you what happens if you go ahead and do this. And well, first we got to go ahead and put the regular attack option. Okay, cool. So if you go ahead and leave this like this is right now, if you just go ahead and hit this and hit play, and went ahead and in, your character's going to go ahead and do the attacks just fine. So if you hit J, he'll do the sword attack. He delays after half a second, he stops, and the character returns to movement. However, you'll see that the character's just going to moonwalk whenever you hit the thing. So it just like walks forward and doesn't actually stop and do the attack. So what we need to do is we need to stop the character's movement. So we're going to go ahead and escape out of that and go back into our controller. So what's going to happen, and let me try and clean this up a little bit so you can see it. So basically, is the character falling? No. So this is the one that's playing our ground attack. What we want to do is we want to stop the character's movement. So you're just going to type in stop movement immediately. So it's this top option that you see there under movement. Stop movement immediately, character movement. If you just go ahead and drop that in, compile, save, go back to the menu, or go back to the main screen here, hit play, you will see whenever you press J now, your character is just going to stop and do the attack, and then we'll continue attacking, walking afterwards. So once again, that's how you're going to go ahead and get that to bypass it. It's a simple fix. We'll come up with something a little bit better after we're done in our prototyping stage, but for the time being, it puts us into a good position to be able to continue prototyping the game. So we've got that set up. We're going to do the same exact thing that we just did right here, the same exact setup for the throwing animation, and actually if you want to, you can make a little bit more room here. Make a little bit more room here with this one. And then you can actually just straight up copy this entire section here of code. Control C, Control V, and now you've got it all copied in. Go up to this. To drag down this little bar, this is falling variable a little bit better or a little bit further. Double click on the actual line from it. It's going to give you a node, which you can then drag off of and connect further. All you got to do is change these animations to jump throw and just the regular throw. Compile, save, everything will be set up exactly as it's supposed to be. If we go ahead and hit play, minimize this out, go ahead and click play, we will see that when we press J to do our sword attack, he does the sword attack. If we press K, it does the kunai, although we don't have the kunai being set to throw yet, so we have to go ahead and code that in a minute. And then if we do the jumping attack, he'll do the jumping kunai throw. So it's all set up like that. However, what we didn't count for is if we hit J and K at the same time. So you can actually go back and forth and weave between the two of these. As you can see, it gets a little bit of a stutter. It's actually not too bad, so we're kind of okay with that. We won't worry about that too much because they tend to overlap each other. So we're not going to worry about that. We're going to go ahead and look at actually animating the kunai right now. Alright, so to go ahead and complete our kunai throwing animation, we're going to need to go ahead and actually create a kunai to throw. So what we're going to do is navigate to the content folder, create a new folder that says items. In the items folder, you're going to create another folder that says kunai. Inside this kunai folder, you're going to right click, you're going to click blueprint class, and you're going to click actor. The actor we're going to create is called a kunai, so just type in kunai. Control Shift S to save everything. And inside the kunai thing, we're going to start doing some actual creation of the kunai itself, but first we need to get the image of the kunai. To do that, head back into your source folder that you created earlier in episode 1 of the series, grab the kunai PNG. If you can just drag this one in, go ahead and drop it in. For some reason, mine doesn't work. It says failed to import. So all I had to do was just go ahead and create a copy of it, literally right-click copy, paste into the same folder, and for some reason it lets me drag that in. I have no idea why. What you're going to do now is right click this, same thing we've been doing, sprite actions, create sprite. So now we have a sprite of our kunai, and we have our kunai itself. So we're going to go ahead and open up this kunai blueprint, and this is basically what we've been looking at with our character, except there's no character in here. So the first thing we're going to want to add into this is going to be the kunai itself. So to get that, we need to type in sprite, and what we want to add in is paper sprite, which is the second option right there. So we have our paper sprite, we can rename it to whatever we want, let's just call it kunai to keep things sorted, and we have our kunai sprite created now. Okay, so we have the sprite of the kunai. To go ahead and add the kunai into this, you're going to go down to the sprite option here, and you're going to look for your kunai that you just created. So kunai underscore is going to bring up the kunai sprite. So that was this tab right here, it says sprite. Now what we want to do is we want to rotate this 270 degrees to get it facing to the right. We want to do it around the y-axis, which is the green arrow that's pointing towards us. So just type in 270 into the meter over here, this transform menu that's over here on the right. Type in 270 in the green tab, and that's going to rotate our kunai to the right. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add a collision box for this. So we're going to go ahead and add a collision, and I'm going to use a capsule collision just because they're so much easier to use. So we're going to leave it capsule, and we have to do some changes to this capsule collision first of all. So make sure we hit compile and save first before we get starting. So under this capsule collision, what we're going to want to do is we're going to go down to this collision tab right here on the right side. So on this collision tab on the right side, what you're going to be looking for is this collision presets that says overlap all dynamic. We want to change that to custom. We also want to change this object type from a world dynamic to a physics body. So we're going to hit compile save, make sure that gets saved through. Collision responses for this first tab, you're going to want to hit block for everything, except you want to uncheck pawn and physics body. So these two options right here, pawn and physics body. Compile and save that. The next thing you're going to do is switch the position of the kunai in the capsule. So click on the capsule and click the kunai over here. Then drag the kunai onto the capsule. So what this is going to do is basically make it so the capsule controls the kunai. Under the kunai, you're going to want to go and hit kunai on this, and then you're going to go ahead to the same tab, the collision tab, and do the same exact setup. So you're going to change the collision preset to custom. From the custom tab, you're going to change it to a physics body. After that, you're going to go ahead and move the pawn and physics body tabs to the overlap, the middle option here. So pawn and physics body, compile, save that. Check your capsule again just to make sure those are all still the same. Cool, we're in business. Now, under the capsule, after you have capsule selected, you're going to click add component. Under add component, you're going to type in projectile movement. So we've got our projectile here. We're going to hit compile, save. Projectile movement, what you're going to do is scroll to the top of the list over here. And on this projectile movement tab up at the top, you're going to go ahead and look for the initial speed. So you see projectile, initial speed, 2,000 we're going to put in. 2,000 seems to be a good number to start with. You can tweak this however you want to adjust it to your play or gameplay. And that is it. Our capsule, kunai, whatever we want to call this sucker, is good to go. So we can go ahead and close that out. We now need to go back into our character and edit the character blueprint to go ahead and spawn this kunai. So what we're going to do is navigate to the handle animation tab and go to the option for input action throw. So what we want to do is make it so a kunai gets spawned every time we throw a kunai, or we trigger the kunai throw animation. So click these two delays over here and extend them way out, because we got a lot of stuff we're going to be adding. The first thing we want to do is we want to spawn an actor. So after we tell the character to go, we're going to want to delay a little bit first. So we're going to delay, and we're going to delay 0.2 of a second. So 0.2 seconds, what it comes out with right at the start. Okay, so we've got our little bit of a delay right now. What we're going to want to do now is create the actor. So drag off of the delay and type in spawn actor from class. It's the very top option. It's going to bring up this menu right here. What you're going to want to do is select the class of kunai. So the kunai is the thing we just created. It's right here. It says kunai. Compile, save. So now it's telling you there's an error. We don't know where we want to spawn this. So we have to tell it where to spawn. To tell it where to spawn, we're going to go to the viewport. On the viewport, we're going to go ahead and click on our character. And then once we've clicked on our character, we're going to click add component. The component we're going to add is an arrow component. So we've added this arrow component in. So the arrow component by default will be pointing towards the right of the character. And what we want to do is move that towards his hand. So two numbers that I found, if you're following along with me, that work very well for it is a z value of -25. So type in -25 in this blue column, and an x value of 100. That's going to position this arrow to the right and about where his hand is when he's throwing the kunai. So once again, the red tab's going to 100, the blue tab's going to -25. Compile, save. As you can see, we have the arrow has been moved down to the right a little bit. So what we're going to do is go ahead and go back into the event graph, and now we need to pick this spawn transform. So what we do is we click on the arrow over here on the left, drag it down, and drop it here. Off the arrow, we're going to click and drag off, and type in transform. There's going to be an option that says get world transform. You see it right here, get world transform. Click on that, and that's going to give you the same orange node. Just plug in the orange node and hit compile and save. So now we've spawned our kunai. Fantastic, our kunai is there. Our delay over here, since we want a half second total, we just need to modify to 0.3 since we're already delaying 0.2 of a second here, 0.3 of a second over here. Perfect, our character is going to go ahead and spawn the kunai now. So if we head back over into the play menu, and actually I set mine up, if you want to make it so you don't have to keep tabbing over, if you hit new editor window right here, it will open up this in a new window here. So we set the thing to be K to throw way back earlier in this video. So if I press K right now, you'll see my guy throws a kunai blade, which is really cool. So he does the animation, he throws the kunai. Jumping animation does the same thing, throws the kunai while he's jumping, and we now have a kunai that launches and flies out. The kunai is affected by gravity, as you can see. It falls down, follows physics, all of that great stuff. So we've got that all set up. Now we want to make it so the kunai collides and hits objects. So to do that, we're going to have to go back to the kunai. So under your items folder, kunai, click on the kunai. We need to drag this capsule root right here, this capsule item, and go to the viewport so you can see what happens. You're going to drag this capsule component up to default scene root. Basically, you're going to make the capsule the default of the thing. It's going to rotate your item 270 degrees, which you obviously don't want. So to rotate it back, click on the kunai itself and rotate it 270 once again back over so it's facing to the right. Compile, save, hit play, and if we go ahead and press K now, we'll throw a kunai and it sticks into the walls. Now before, you see how they're stacking over each other? If we didn't set them both to being physical body when we did that, they wouldn't overlap. They would just keep connecting to each other and you could make a bridge of kunai, which is what we don't want to do. But now we have it so our kunai stick into walls when we throw them. We can feel like a real ninja jumping around our little area, and we have a fully functioning character. So for the next video, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to work on a bit of a heads-up display sort of thing. So get a health bar, get some interaction with some pickups, things like that, just to get the game feeling more like a game. So anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can stay updated on this tutorial series. And as always, I will see you at the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.